Let's talk about divorce. So I can talk about divorce from two angles, from my parents' divorce and from my own divorce. My parents' divorce made divorce my biggest fear in life, as well as financial insecurity, one of my biggest fears. And so I'm going to start with that one, especially because I'm just going in chronological order. Up until I was 13 years old, I had a very lovely, normal childhood. My father had a successful career. I grew up one of 4 children across the street from my grandparents, and we had a very tight-knit family. I was very blessed. I had a lot of opportunity, a good education. The summer going into high school, my grandmother, who was the matriarch of our family, passed away from breast cancer, and I imagine my mother said to herself that she was unhappy, and that experience made her realize that, and about a month later, she left my father. When my parents first split, it seemed relatively amicable. They were separated. My father had rented a place a couple of blocks away, very close, and my father had given my mother a Jewish divorce. My family are pioneers in the issues of Jewish divorce, and so my mother received her Jewish divorce very quickly, but they were still in mediation, discussing, finances, child custody. They had been married for 16 years, and they were only about 4 months split. And so they were negotiating their civil divorce. Obviously, if you're heading to a divorce or you've been divorced, you know that unraveling a 16-year marriage with 4 children takes time. What happens next? Next, I know it is actually a Jewish holiday called Hanukkah, and also my birthday. And I just turned 14 years old. And I receive a call from my father that says, Liz, I want you to come over for dinner. I want you to meet my new wife. Okay, real story. After that, obviously everyone's like, what is going on? Everyone in my family, aunts, uncles, mother, siblings, like, what is happening? My father, a rabbi married my father to a ultra-Orthodox woman that I had never met. And my father basically turned from modern Orthodox to ultra-Orthodox overnight. And he married this woman without telling any of us, and that was his new life. He moved to Crown Heights, moved in with this woman. This woman is honestly evil, and sorry, I don't care to say it, even I don't care. She ruined my family. She should be accountable for her actions. And she, I think, was threatened by my mother. I think my father was still very much in love with my mother and was hurt. And he made poor and weak choices during a vulnerable time that became, permanent. And this woman took control of his mind and his dollars, told him a bunch of things like I'm not going to get into it out of respect of certain family members in my life, but horrible things. And she also told him that he was never allowed to speak to my mother ever again. Now, they had 4 children together, ranging from 8 to 17 at the time. And if you are a parent, you understand that that is a sick thing. She told him he was never allowed to drive down my block again. So when I was a child with suitcases from going to forced custody, he would drop us blocks away in a neighborhood that honestly wasn't ideal. In Brooklyn, every block is another neighborhood, and let us walk alone. But the sickest thing is that my parents have not spoken directly since I'm 13 years old, and it's really not my mother's fault at all. A rabbi told my father that for the sake of peace in the home, he needed to listen to his new wife, and he really lost it. His new wife told him that all we wanted from him was money, and that's what he started to believe, and the entire relationship became about money. My father did whatever he could to harm my mother with money, to use us as pawns to harm my mother with money, and it was really traumatic. I would say the most traumatic memory I have of my parents' divorce was I had ruptured ovarian cysts. I was 14 years old, rushed to the emergency room in the middle of the night in insane pain, and my father refused to. At the time I was a minor, you needed signatures from both parents to have surgery, and my father knew what was going on, refused to pick up the phone to speak to my mother, and my father knew what was going on and voluntarily left me in the ER in pain until he got to his office the next day and his secretaries could fax permission. Needless to say, this was very traumatic. There are many other stories I could go into, but it's just not necessary. Why am I telling you these details? I am trying to shape the context of the trauma and so that you understand why I approached my divorce in the manner in which I did. And I think that I, along with my ex-husband, are doing an amazing job. My kids are resilient and strong and well adjusted through a hard divorce at a young age. And it was precisely these traumatic experiences that made me want to break the cycle. But they also made me extremely afraid to ever get divorced. So it took me longer than I probably should have waited in order to make that decision because I was so afraid of it as to how bad it could be, and I never wanted those things to happen to my children ever. My parents' divorce took, my mom says 5, I say 7. Who cares? What's the big deal? It was traumatic, and it affected me my whole life. It affected my relationship with men. It affected my relationship with money because my father used money as a means to control us and hurt my mother. It made me develop a lot of financial insecurities and a very weird relationship with money. And you know, money is a very big issue in everyone's life. Finances are a big thing that you need to be secure with because they're one of the main reasons that couples get divorced. People don't talk about these things, and it's important to building intimacy. Now, let's fast forward to my divorce. Because of the traumatic things that I experienced as a child, I was always terribly afraid of getting divorced. It was the number one thing I was certain in my life that I wasn't going to do. And I married my husband very young. I was 21 when I got married, and I really loved him, but I was so young, I didn't even know who I was, and my relationship with my father was in a very precarious state at the time, and I'm sure I was looking for love in other places because I didn't have it. And also, it's just customary to get married young where I'm from. In the beginning, I was in love, but early on in the marriage, I probably saw signs that things were not right. But again, I was already married, I was young. Where I come from, you know, divorce was a lot less common than it is now, but it's still, you know, you don't want to get divorced so young. It's nothing that anybody wants. But again, it was my biggest insecurity. And because I was traumatized, I never wanted my children to experience that. But I didn't even have children at the time when I first started doubting my marriage. But I just did not want, I was never getting divorced in my head. Fast forward, a dead best friend, a lot of financial loss, betrayal on behalf of both my ex-husband and myself in different ways, and a lot of other loss, my father-in-law getting sick, passing away, miscarrying. That all happened within like a matter of 2 years. It took all of those experiences for me to finally acknowledge to myself and have to face the fact that I was truly unhappy. And people ask me all the time, why did I get divorced? I can list you a dozen reasons from like what my ex-husband did, but the reason that I finally pulled the trigger is because I wasn't proud of who I was in that marriage. I wasn't happy with myself, and I knew that if I stayed in that situation, we had given it our all. We were in marriage counseling, honestly, our entire marriage, and I really tried. And I realized that we were just two very different people. We didn't think the same. I was unhappy. I wasn't proud of who I was, and things were not going to change. And the only thing that would change them was to leave the situation. When I finally decided to leave the situation, it was in the worst financial time of my marriage. I had just lost a baby, and I had a 1-year-old and change. My father-in-law was very sick. I miscarried at 12 weeks, did a bunch of soul searching, and about a month later realized that I was truly unhappy and I needed to make moves. Earlier that day, my ex and I had gotten into a big blow up, and I had told him we needed to stop trying to have kids, we needed to get divorced. Later that night, I was pregnant with my amazing daughter. Thank God for her, I swear. but my initial reaction was a curse word. I screamed a curse word out loud. And after a lot of therapy, I decided to keep the baby. But that pregnancy was very challenging, as you can imagine. I was pregnant knowing I was getting divorced in the worst financial situation of my life, and I had no career. I had just started working. I had just started painting. I was a Upper East Side housewife prior to all this, and I was very scared. 10 weeks into my pregnancy, my father-in-law dies, so that added some stress. I had a very complex pregnancy, and then 3 weeks after I had my daughter, my ex and I had a blow-up fight. Same shit, different day, you know, nothing unusual, but I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take the bad energy anymore, and I realized we were not on the same program. We were never going to be on the same program, and I told him I was out. For the 5 months after that, my ex and I lived in the same house, in an apartment, okay, with a newborn and a 2-year-old, and at the time we had no liquidity. We were in the middle of negotiations on a business deal. The second we closed that deal, we had a little bit of liquidity. We knew what we could negotiate with, and my ex and I came up with a settlement ourselves in 6 weeks. I saw through my parents' divorce that lawyers try to fuel the fire very often, and not only is it bad energy, you know, I said to myself, I'd rather spend positive energy making my own money, which is what, as a divorcee, you need to get yourself on your own 2 feet. No matter if you're getting the best divorce settlement ever, it's not going to last forever. Positive energy making my own money, then negative energy fighting over money that might not exist, I'm likely not going to find. And you know, we have finite energy. If I put the time into preparing a case for court and energy with my attorney, and $500, $600, $700, $1,200 an hour on an attorney, you know, my energy and dollars are going there. But if I took that same amount of time and focused it on starting a career and investing in starting a career, that ultimately I will have more of what I want, which is self-fulfillment, financial security, and a way to take care of myself. To me, that was the better solution. It also enabled me, you know, I saw from my parents how traumatic court was and the attorney process was, and I had enough trauma. I didn't want more of it, and I was honestly just ready for positive energy. So I made that vow. I knew my life was going to be very, very challenging. I took a really poor divorce settlement in my agreement, in my opinion, and I just vowed that I was going to work hard, and I started busting my ASS all day, all night, and pretty much everything dropped out of my life except for work and my kids, and those were my priorities. I did an amazing job transitioning my children. You know, sometimes moving and that process can be traumatic. My kids were young, so I don't think that they remember it as much. But either way, my son was 2 and he had a memory. And, you know, that is a time in your life when you need to be willing to rally and your entire support system, your friends, your family, to help you in the ways that you need help. If you need them to watch your children so that you can pack, cry, go for a run, whatever it is an urgent time for self-care. And to shield your children during that time by asking for help from others is a very good idea. The biggest thing in divorce that I think has helped my children be as strong and resilient as they are is that my ex and I, even at times when we may hate each other behind the scenes to one another, my children do not feel that. For my children, we are best friends forever. We are a united front. My children are loved by both of us, okay? If I want to vent or complain about my ex, I do my very, very best for my children to never hear that, for me to vent to the right people, to my friends, to my therapist, to my family, whoever I need to vent to, but to shield your kids from it. Your kids need to feel that they are loved. And if you're coming from a circumstance of abuse or something like that, I recommend that you seek the advice of, you know, professional counsel, because your children likely have trauma that you will need to address and heal. But very often when you get divorced, you are going to downgrade financially. you might feel it, but your kids, all they need is love. They need to see someone who is strong and who loves them. And that's all they need. So I really do believe that that mindset of focusing positive energy, making my own money, making progress in my life, then negative energy towards the process of divorce was the best decision of my life. And it was very empowering and it was the right decision. Granted, I'm not saying that that's the route for everybody. Sometimes you do need to fight. And unfortunately, it doesn't take two to tango in divorce. If one person wants to torture the other due to our court systems, they can. What I recommend, if that is happening to you, that you really lean on your friends to help you through it. Have a good attorney. Get the right advice. Google, do your research. Don't let yourself get screwed, right? Make the decision that's right for you, but no matter what, these are very hard things. You need to lean on your support system and make sure that you heal. When you're coming out of divorce, you're coming out with problems. Before you're ready for a relationship or to be healthy, you need to work on yourself and focus on yourself. So I also did like a behind the scenes interview with a divorcee who's going through some hard things right now with her ex-husband. So we are putting together an interview there where you can kind of see questions being thrown at me about specifics in divorce. So check out more in that clip.